My best friend got replaced. I had been debating whether to tell this story, but I think it's best to get it off my chest. Last winter, a bunch of my buddies and I went on a trip to Colorado. We booked this sweet Airbnb lodge for a pretty cheap price for 6 days. For privacy reasons, I'll be using fake names. I went with my friends Rob, AJ, Ben, Terry, and his girlfriend, Grace. We had planned this trip for a couple of months, so we were all really excited. I had known these guys since we were little kids, and now, being in our late 20s, we never really get the chance to all hang out at the same time anymore. This trip was going to be special for us. We drove up there, fully packed and ready to go snowboarding while enjoying the fresh mountain air. Nothing could compare to the beauty of the snowy mountains on the horizon. About 10 minutes from our Airbnb, we noticed that the house was on a small mountain, very secluded, with not many other homes nearby. When we finally arrived, Ben, Rob, and I just took it all in. We had never seen snow before in our lives, and experiencing it with the brothers I love made it unforgettable. The first few days were amazing. We went snowboarding for the first time, visited some cool little towns, and partied our asses off back at the lodge. Then, the last day arrived. We planned to stay at the house, enjoy the hot tub, and have one final horror. That morning, Terry gathered everyone and told us he had a surprise for later that night and to be prepared. His words confused me, but we all laughed and nodded in agreement. Since we were up in the mountains, Rob, AJ, Ben, and I decided to explore a bit, giving the couple some alone time and letting them prepare the surprise while we were gone. We started our descent down the other side of the mountain, not a care in the world. I can't express how stunning the view was. It was like something out of a dream. After about an hour, we decided to head back, but Rob wanted to stop for a quick smoke break. We found a huge rock where we could all sit, and as we relaxed, we started guessing what Terry's surprise could be. Ben said it's probably some fancy liquor he got when we visited that town earlier this week. Rob replied, "Is that really surprising? We know Terry likes to go all out on these kinds of trips. Could be something crazier for all we know." AJ took a puff of the joint and then spilled the beans. Apparently, Terry had bought magic mushrooms from some random guy in town the day before. Everyone's eyes widened with excitement. Rob yelled, "Let's get the fuck back now." "Holy shit, thank you, Terry." We all got up in a hurry and rushed back toward the lodge. But as I jumped off the rock, I got a strange feeling, like I was being watched. I scanned the area and saw a dark humanoid figure in the distance. I hesitated, wondering who the hell would be up there on the mountain. But when I glanced back, I realized my friends were already a decent distance away. I must have zoned out staring at that figure. Shaking off the unease, I caught up with my friends. I didn't say anything about what I saw, I just told them I was taking in the view one last time. On the way back, we started noticing strange handmade stick objects scattered around. They were everywhere, on the ground, even in the trees. AJ said, "You guys noticing all these cross-like stick things?" We all responded in unison, "Yeah." AJ proceeds to pick up the handmade crosses. We heard an immediate howl, which sounded like a wolf. AJ states, "Something is wrong with this. I can feel some uneasy energy." Rob smirked. "Ever heard of a skinwalker? That was the howl of one," I chuckled. "You're full of shit." He laughed but told us to be on the lookout anyway. This wasn't out of the blue for Rob. He always tried to spook us when we were in the woods. Ben mutters, "Has there always been wolves out here?" I remembered hearing about there being a few scattered in Colorado, but ushered Ben to keep moving forward. We finally made it back to the lodge and rushed inside to grab some drinks and get ready for the surprise. Terry and Grace came out of their room, and Grace, shaking her head in disappointment, asked why we were back so early. Rob grinned. "We all want to see the surprise you've got for us." Terry smirked and disappeared back into his room. A moment later, he came out with a decent amount of magic mushrooms. He started separating them for everyone. That sure brought up Ben and AJ's mood. After that little spooky walk, we all needed to just relax and have fun on our last night. I was the only one who didn't partake. I had to drive in the morning, and I hated the taste of them. So, I became the designated trip sitter for the night. I wasn't even sure if the shrooms were legit, but Terry had said he met a cool stoner in town, and the guy had hooked him up for a decent price. A couple of hours passed, and everything was fine and dandy. They were all tripping their balls off. Rob couldn't stop laughing for a whole hour straight. It was pure gold. We were downstairs on the couch, watching a movie with flashing neon lights. The movie was practically made for people on magic mushrooms. The vibes were unmatched. Everyone is having a joyful time, laughing and singing together. Then things started getting weird. Rob was rolling a joint in the corner. Ben and AJ were glued to the TV, unable to look away. Grace kissed Terry on the cheek and went to the bathroom. I sat next to Terry and told him what a great trip this had been. He sighed. You know, this trip wasn't the best for me. I looked at him strangely, understanding he was still tripping. Why? Don't get me wrong. I love being with everyone, but I'm not a fan of the cold. Let's stick to warm weather trips next time. I nodded. We were from South Florida after all. Hard habits of bathing in the warm weather die hard. How about Mexico? I suggested. He shook his head. New Orleans. Rob immediately threw his hand up in agreement. Ben's eyes widened and turned to us and raised both hands. AJ, still giggling at the TV, didn't even acknowledge us. Terry turned to me. One more vote and it's in stone. I raised my hand. Terry clapped me on the back. Can't wait to get shit-faced on Bourbon Street with my best friends. Then boom. A rock comes flying through, shattering the glass door. A blood-curdling scream erupted outside, sounding identical to Grace. Within a second, Terry bolted outside. Rob jumped up, his weed spilling everywhere. Ben darted past me heading into his room. AJ, still glued to the TV. Without thinking, I chased after Terry, yelling for him to stop. It was freezing, damn near 0 degrees. After 10 minutes of running in a cold, bitter environment, I heard 2 screams in opposite directions. One was a woman's voice screaming for help. The other was Terry screaming at the top of his lungs, new. I decided to follow Terry's screams down the mountain, then complete dead utter silence. The strange stick formations were everywhere, illuminated in the moonlight. A sickening feeling of disgust washed over me. I heard a croak behind me. I turned. Terry was on his knees, staring up at the sky, tears streaming down his face. Then I saw it. A dark humanoid figure loomed over him. I can't describe in words the presence radiating off this thing. Chills shot down my spine with a head-splitting migraine. I cannot comprehend what I saw next. It opened Terry's jaw impossibly wide. The thing in a swift motion slithered down his throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. Frozen in a state of utter terror and confusion. Then Terry turned to me, his face twisting into a forced, gut-wrenching grin. My body kicked into action, and I ran away in a cowardly fashion. For fuck's sakes, that was my best friend. I just stood there and watched. I feel so much regret for not even trying to help, but what could I have done? I ran until I reached the house, locked the doors, and frantically searched for the others. I found AJ and Ben asleep. I woke Ben, but he just groaned, checked his phone, and mumbled, "Dude, it's 7 a.m., 7 a.m. I had been outside for 9 hours. How could that be possible? It was just pitch black a second ago. My mind went into overdrive. I started to panic, but couldn't mutter a single word to Ben. I quickly stormed out and headed to the bathroom, furiously splashing water in my face, the events that just conspired looping over and over again. I took a shower and got dressed, debating on calling the police. I finally left my room and overheard footsteps from above. Morning came. Everyone was laughing in the kitchen, including Terry. He smiled at me. "Did you sleep well? We're all packed up, just waiting on you." I nodded. I was suspiciously checking out Terry from head to toe. I mean, nothing stood out of the ordinary at all. Was this really my best friend since grade school across from me? I went into a deep thought. I started to question my own sanity. My mind had to be playing tricks on me, but it felt so real, so goddamn real. Then I looked over and saw Grace. She looked perfectly fine. I mean, definitely hungover, but normal as always. I decided not to mention anything about what happened last night. I mean, no one even mentioned the events that conspired the night before. The even strangest thing was the glass door was completely fixed, almost looking untouched. I loaded up the car, and I sped the fuck off that forsaken mountain. For the first hour, AJ was rambling about still being hot. Seems like all of my friends browned out the night before after further discussion. Not a single person had a clear explanation for the night, but they all agreed on how great the shrooms were. Everyone looked like shit except for Terry. I was still suspicious, but held in my thoughts, afraid of how I would be seen. Who in their right mind would believe that? I would be ostracized for such nonsense. But eventually, as I drove, everyone passed out, except Terry. He stared at me through the rearview mirror, eyes wide and bloodshot. He grinned. "Fun trip, right? Can't wait for the next one." I swallowed. "New Orleans, right?" Terry smirked. I was thinking about Canada. The cold is growing on me. A single tear slid down his cheek.